Hi, welcome to my channel. I'm Michelle, and today I'm joining in on the open collab hosted by Abby from Rooted and Rest and Jessica from the Waldock Way. I think these are awesome ways to get to know new homeschoolers and get new ideas. As a first-year homeschooler, I have found these playlists really helpful. So the topic we're talking about today is homeschooling through the holidays. Now, today I'm specifically going to talk about the month of November and Thanksgiving because I feel like there's a lot to talk about in that. So if you'd like to see how I plan on homeschooling through December and Christmas and Hanukkah and those different holidays, you'll have to come back and see that separate video. So I'm only going to focus on the month of November and Thanksgiving. So I think the month of November is a wonderful time to learn about Indigenous people, Native Americans. November is Native American Heritage Month, so I think it's great to learn about their culture and different aspects of that. And I use a variety of resources for this. I use children's books. I myself read some books as well. The main resource I use is this subscription box called Little Justice Leaders. If you're new to my channel, it's a subscription box aimed for children, and they tackle different social justice themes every single month. For the month of November, and this is not sponsored, I buy this with my own money. If you're curious what's inside these boxes, I do have unboxing videos if you want to check them out. But what's inside this box is Indigenous people and language awareness. So I thought it fit perfectly for the month of November, and what I love about this box is it comes with different activities, but especially with the box, they always pull resources from people who are within that group. I think when you're talking about different groups, to best get the ideas and perspective from those in that particular group is really good. You know, especially when we talk about Thanksgiving, we were often told the very watered down, the Pilgrims and the Native Americans sat down and had this lovely feast and it was all about peace. And that's not, as we know as adults, accurate. So it's very important for me that my children understand Native American culture, what actually went on during Thanksgiving, different things like that. So, if I had mentioned before, I have an 8-year-old daughter, a 5-year-old daughter, homeschooling them. So I will use the different things within this box. I'm going to show you some of the things I use and then some of the books. So the first thing is, in the book, or in the subscription box, they always give you a book that goes with the theme for the month. So, and with the book, they always give you a book list for both you for your children to learn more about the topic, but also as adults to learn more, because I think this is extremely helpful. As adults, we can always be learning more, especially when it comes to topics we necessarily weren't always taught all perspectives of the story. So I really appreciate that they have the option of books to learn more for kids and adults, and I will be sharing some of the books on that list as well. But this is the book that came with it, and I'm going to open it real quick because I want to pronounce it properly. One thing I really like about this book is they have on the bottom how to properly pronounce the words in it. So it's called Ojaliha, We Are Grateful. It's about a Cherokee tribe, and it goes through all the different things they are grateful for. And again, the illustrations are really nice. It talks about different parts of their culture, different things they celebrate. It also has the correct terminology they would use to describe those things in their language. And like I said before, I really like that it has the how to properly pronounce those things in there. So I really like this book. My kids really liked it. One thing that came along with this book in that subscription box was some activities. One of them was a kind of handout to go over it with your kids, just lead those discussions. The subscription box is very good at conversation starters and how to best lead those conversations, especially since I'm not a person that is personally from that group of people. I want to be respectful when presenting those ideas, beliefs, traditions that group of people have. So it also has discussion questions based on pages, different things to bring up. So I think that's really helpful. The activity that was included was a Venn diagram where you talk about the things that Cherokee people, and this was my 8-year-olds, some of the things the Cherokee people were grateful, some of the things you're grateful, and then some of the similarities you have of what you and Cherokee people are grateful for. So I thought that was a wonderful activity. of acknowledging their traditions, but also, and their culture, but also realizing that you also have some things in common with them. I think when we learn about different cultures and traditions, it broadens our perspective on things. So I thought that was really helpful. Let's see, the next book, I'm gonna keep going into books here. So the next book I'm gonna talk about is a child's book. It's called Go Show the World. And it's about famous Indigenous people and heroes. And what I really love about this book is the graphics are amazing. And it goes over different people, some famous people, athletes. There's, I think, a movie star in here too, but it goes over how they contributed, what they did. I think that's really good because often in things like books, TV, film, we don't often see people, Native Americans, portrayed, and if they are, not necessarily in the most positive light. So again, I really enjoyed this book. Another one is Huate and the Peacemaker. Again, the illustrations are amazing in this book. It talks about a Native American who goes through a difficulty because the Native American tribes are fighting each other, and he loses his family and becomes very angry and wants revenge. And a man comes talking about peace, and they go from tribe to tribe, uniting the tribes. And again, it's just very nice to learn some of the cultural traditions, and it's beautifully illustrated. Another one is We Are Water Protectors. And I think this is a great book because it talks about the importance of taking care of the earth and how water is important, very important to the Native American people. It represents life. And again, beautiful illustrations once again. And it goes through the story of why it's important. It also talks about Native Americans standing up for what they believe in, how they've had to fight most of their time, at least since 1492. And the struggles they go through. Some of them, I don't have physical copies of them. I do have some on Hoopla. Again, I didn't purchase any of these books. These were all from my library, and Hoopla is a wonderful option. So I will put a picture up here real quick. One of them is History Smashers, the Mayflower. This is a great graphic novel book for kids. My 8-year-old loves graphic novels. It kind of smashes the most common myths about the Mayflower and the pilgrimage, and it's a really engaging way to do it, so I highly recommend that. Another one is When We Were Alone. This book is about a grandmother and a granddaughter in the garden, and the granddaughter's asking her grandmother why she does certain things, like, why do you have such long hair? And the grandmother explains that when she was younger, she wasn't allowed to do that. It's going back to the idea that when Native Americans were relocated and forced to go to residential schools to learn how to be pretty much more white, they were forced to cut their hair. They weren't allowed to use their language. They weren't allowed to really experience any of their culture or their traditions within these schools. So the grandmother's explaining to her daughter how she wasn't allowed, or her granddaughter, how she wasn't allowed to do these things growing up, and that's why they're so important to her now. So again, I think it's great conversation starter to talk about what they value, their traditions, their culture, but it's also a great starting to talk about what happened to those people. And the residential schools, I know, can be a difficult topic to cover, but I think it's something that needs to be discussed because it wasn't just this happy, let's have turkey and have peace. These people were forcibly relocated. Their children were taken away from them and forced to go to schools where they were pretty much neglected and abused. So I think it tells it in a way that is very appropriate for children. And again, the social justice themed subscription box I get, Little Justice Leaders, is themed for children, and there has different age groups you can choose from. But knowing that it is a difficult topic to talk about, but giving you ways to talk about it that's age appropriate. Another one is I Am Not a Number. This one was a difficult read just because the material is more difficult to talk about. Again, it's about one of those residential schools. It is written by a woman who went through that experience. It's her experience going through it, and it's a children's book. And she was forced to go to a residential school when she was 8 years old, and her experience with neglect and abuse within that book. And again, it can be difficult. There's a part in here in the book where she talks about how she was fed something, and if she didn't eat it, she'd be fed continually over and over again until she ate it, and if she threw it up, they would force her to eat the vomit. And that might be extremely difficult to talk about, and if you think that is harsh for a child to learn, just think about that for a minute, because that's something a child physically went through. If you think it's too harsh for a child to read about, there's a child that actually physically went through that. So I think it's really good to start those conversations with children about the different things these people experienced and why it was wrong. So again, I recommend that book. So some books I recommend that were on that list that I recommend for myself to read to learn more about it is The Heartbeat on Wounded Knee, Native America from 1890 to the present. And this kind of goes over, obviously it starts after the Wounded Knee, but it talks about what Native Americans have gone through from that to the present. I think it goes up to 2018, but different things they experienced and how hard they have had to fight to keep their traditions, their culture alive, because it's something that was forcibly, especially in those residential schools, where they wanted to stop them. They wanted to turn them into more what everybody else was. So I think that's a really good read. Another one is, I picked this up at the library book sale. It's 1491, New Revelations of the Americas Before Columbus. It's funny how people think the country started in 1492 when Columbus landed, but this goes in to talk about what it was like before he got there, how there was culture and civilization thriving, and what that looked like. And I think that's a good background knowledge for you as a person and teacher to have. So some different resources I used within the book are, they have different resources you use within the subscription box. So they have different cards here. One of them is for every box you buy, they donate to a specific organization that is involved with that specific theme. They also have different websites for adults to learn more, to get better background knowledge. One of the things we're going to be going over, and what I do with these subscription boxes, I break it up into a month. So one day every month for about 45 minutes to an hour, we will cover a specific activity or something in that, and then we'll read a couple of the books recommended. But one of the activities we will be doing is looking at language, specifically how to properly refer to Native Americans, what they prefer, and why it's important to know how to properly refer to a specific group of people. Another thing we're gonna learn about is their native language. Like I said in that book they sent, that shows how the tribal language would actually be pronounced and how it differs and why it's important for these people to keep their language alive, especially when they were in those residential schools and they were not allowed to speak, especially in that book, I'm Not a Number. She was physically hit if she spoke in her native tongue. So I think that's a really good thing to go over. Another thing we will be going over is a land acknowledgement agreement, and that's just the idea that you acknowledge the land you're on, and it comes with different maps and resources, websites down below, and I'll link the website down below, where you can search where you physically live and what native tribes either live there or are currently still living in there, so what land you are currently occupying. And it has a land acknowledgement agreement where you talk about what colonizers or the government did to Native and Indigenous communities, how their land was taken from them, how they had to forcibly cut their hair, their children were sent to residential schools, how it's disrespectful to refer to them as Indians or dress up as Indians in things like Halloween, and how they're portrayed in movies and TV, especially in the older ones. And it has different discussion questions linked in there. Again, one of the biggest things is to present it from that group's perspective is my main thing. So that is, oh, and it came with a gratitude journal because again, we are talking about, with that book, we are grateful. It highly encourages children to keep a gratitude journal about different things they are grateful. So those are the resources I will be using for November. And again, I take one day a week for about an hour and we'll use different parts of these resources. The first week we did this, the gratitude journal, and the Venn diagram picture, and we read some books about what is grateful and what is Cherokee people. Next, or this coming week, we'll be talking about language and reading a couple of different books from there. The third week, we will be talking about land acknowledgement, looking at that website, figuring out what land we are on, what people lived on this land before us. One of the activities is also to draw a picture of a special place, especially since Native Americans were forcibly relocated. They had to find ways to keep their culture alive. So one of the activities is to draw a picture of what necessarily, you know, a home or would be for you. It's not a physical building, but trying to dig deeper into those kids' imaginations and realize that home is not a place necessarily. And the last week we'll be talking about the land acknowledgement, again looking at the maps and specifically looking at different tribes depending on where we live in and doing some research on that. So that is everything we are doing for November, and for pretty much Thanksgiving, really just focusing on Indigenous people. We will have some of the, like the Mayflower, and I will read some stuff about Columbus's too, but I want the focus to be on gratefulness and the Native American culture. So if you have any questions, please leave them down below, but thanks for watching. And again, if you want to see what I'm doing for Christmas, make sure you check back.